On the other side of a mirror, there's a reflection, where the shadow of a family stands and remembers. Behind the crystal surfaces, generations of the skilled and dedicated stood as tall as the mirrors they've produced, which have hung in Maltese homes for almost a century. Looking back through the glass, it glimmers in those humble beginnings of a man's spirit to achieve and provide. And when we see the men in the mirrors, honour and integrity shines upon those that provided for so many. Our voyage begins in the 18th century when a French ship's pilot set sail for Malta. Jean-Francois Guillaume came from a family of chartered merchantmen in a fishing port in the French province of Marseille. He was a pioneer in his own right, travelling and trading across the sea. From his first marriage, his son Vincent had no less than 11 children, and it was his son Isidoro who was to be the great-grandfather to the founder of a Maltese family business that went on to trade across the seas and through the generations. That pioneer was Xavier Guillaume. Xavier could well have gleaned his entrepreneurial spirit from his father Paolo.
I know that he was involved in some tobacco business, not something great, probably pushing a cart or something.
The Guillaume Tobacconist Company would normally consist of Xavier's father delivering cigarettes by cart, and the young Xavier, now aged 12, would on occasion accompany his father.
My father was a very astute person, I would say very economical. He never threw anything away. He comes from the old school where people who started the life from scratch have a value of all things. My father certainly was a risk taker to start certain ideas or businesses from scratch with very little financial support was certainly an attribute of a risk taker. Because if you imagine anything that can go wrong when you are starting a business, you'll never start it.
Yet, another new start beckoned for the Guillaume business when they found bigger and better premises and 561 the High Street, Hamroon. What they hadn't reckoned on were the neighbours. When Xavier applied for the permit, Mr. and Mrs. Schwerer voiced their objections due to the noise levels. Local officials were called in. They were to put Xavier's business to the test. Obtaining the permit was critical to the business and to Xavier. The test would take place on the Schwereb's roof, where Mr. Schwereb would only consent to the permit if tests confirmed a decibel level not detrimental to his health and well-being. A police sergeant remained with the bevellers in the factory, and at a given signal, the grinding commenced. The bevellers were only using the fine sand normally utilised at the end of the bevelling process. This gave it a much softer and more mellow noise than the normal coarse grain. On hearing it, Mrs. Schwereb exclaimed, "Oh, how nice! It sounds just like the rain." Xavier's factory had passed its test, the permit was granted, and they were back in business.
My father must have joined the company in Hamroon, Gulaimir, about 2 years before the war broke out.
My father, Samuel Berfa, he started working with Gulaimir in 1931, 32, something like that. No, in the beveling department, always. And I was a small boy that time. I was proud with Mr. Gulaimir because he enjoyed the job. For me, Mr. Xavier Gulaimir, he was like my father.
I think descendants of the Gulaimir family today and in the future would look at the Gulaimir inheritance, I call it, as a milestone in the history of industry in Malta during the 20th century.
Xavier was now to begin his journey of producing a family and married in the Christmas of 1937. In 1939, fresh from the success of being appointed as Malta's representative at the Tripoli Trade Fair, where S. Gulamir and co. were awarded the gold medal for high standards, he was also presented with his first child of 4, Paul, followed by Tony in 1940. They were to grow up and play in the debris of destruction of their country, which had suffered the heaviest sustained bombing attack of World War II. But the bombs did not break the Maltese spirit or the Gulamir's fight for survival.
The Gulamir mirror business in those days took a strategic sort of part, and it was playing a small part in supplying the silvering needs, as I said, for the searchlights, which is very important during the air raids, and for the sharpening of the bayonet in preparation for a possible invention.
Since Malta was a small island, very strategically positioned in the middle of the Mediterranean, it was subject to many air raids by the Aeronautica of Italy and later in 1942 by the Luftwaffe of Germany. And therefore the Maltese defense had a system of searchlights which they used to put facing the sky at night. And these searchlights, like big dishes, like domes upside down, they used to be lit at night, searching for enemy planes, so that enemy planes would be deterred to come to Malta, but if they do, they would easily be spotted in the dark skies. And these searchlights became so hot when they were being used on our bastions, airports, etc. The silvering comes off quite quickly, in a week or two. So Gulamir managed to get commissioned by the British forces to silver the searchlights again and again and again.
My father himself and some employees were digging a shelter or a bunker, which was partly for our family and another part for the public. And I remember at a very young age going down this bunker and hearing the people saying the rosary while the bombs were falling, and the prayers rose. It was a crescendo according to the vicinity of the bombs, that as if the prayers would more or less deter the bombs. Literally saying the prayers, and when the bombs are coming closer, so the prayers are going higher, you know, the choir, like as if it's going to stop, either to deafen the sound of the bombs and so that the children don't hear it. But I remember this specifically. And then when the prayer, the tone goes higher.
I wish to read a few lines from a little poem I wrote when my father died in November 2012. On the 11th of November, which we call Poppy Day, Armistice Day, very significant for his role also during the war. From the bastions of Cottonera and the darkness of the war, you came to build a family in Hamrun, where you never ceased reflecting in a dark sky, providing light.